Hip politics, baby.
Down because this is where from the start of the actual audio, and when people see the clip version, we'll start this.
Wait, so are we live right now?
We are live on Facebook right now. But the Facebook is more so, I just want, like I said, to everybody who's on Facebook, this is more so just trying to figure out a way to get it immediately. Myself, co-host, he's a current Capitol Hill staffer, and like really experienced, been there like 20 years.
Oh.
Mike McQuarrie. So sorry everybody, Mike's not here this morning. We're trying to practice social distancing. But I felt the need, like just people are asking, like I said, the Hip Politics podcast has just kind of blown up and done a lot in the last year. We just had our first live audience podcast a week ago at the America Vote Summit, talking with leaders of color from some of the top voting and empowerment organizations. I encourage everybody to go watch that and listen to that. We have like head of MoveOn.org, held the vote for our Future Action Fund, like 200 people. Was dope. But with the concept of the Hip Politics podcast and the Politics Network is to really kind of break down and demystify things in government, things in the political and social justice world, and just things in the general world, but for kind of deconstruct the news people are hearing. Because a lot of people just like they're hearing stuff is going over their head. They're seeing little clips of headlines. Most people aren't reading or diving into stuff, and people aren't really speaking their language. It's like hip hop. Like like hip hop is now like a 40, 50-year-old genre. Like Jay-Z my favorite rapper just turned 50. Like Dr. Dre's almost 60, you know what I mean? And then you got people like NLE Chopra and NBA Youngboy, who are like some of the hottest young artists that we might be not listen to, but they 17, 19, and 20 years old.
Right.
That breadth of like what the generation is, and now that it's fully inclusive, is the number one, not just music genre, but cultural language, and like it affects everything we do. So we still tap into a common like theme, and the political process is one of the most important things to us, in the sense that it allows us and gives us the power, like there to really organize and get things better in our community and our lives, but we really have to understand how to mobilize it. So that's why hip politics, like our theme is like mobilizing the political power of hip hop. So with that, I think that knowledge, that the reason why it brings us here to you, Dr. Llanos, we wanted to talk with somebody like Corona just took over. Like Corona epidemic is the number one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 trending topic. It's all anybody wants to talk about. It's all anybody, like it's what's dominating beyond the headlines our life. It's altering, it's going to change the dynamics of the financial system, healthcare system, has everybody freaked out. And there's just a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of basic knowledge around viruses. So I wanted to bring in an expert, or at least somebody who's educated in the field and works in the fields of both healthcare and then also like really around viruses, which brings it to here. So for our first live, Facebook Live, multiple weird camera experience podcast, I have one of my former classmates and a very noted and intelligent woman, Dr. Adana Llanos. How are you doing today?
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So you are a assistant professor of epidemiology at Rutgers University, correct?
That's correct.
The PhD and MPH.
Yeah.
What's your public health degree? Like, what's the subject?
So I actually have a PhD in genetics, and when we talk a little bit about what I actually do as an epidemiologist, we can get into that. But I have a Master of Public Health in Epidemiology, and my primary appointment is in the Department of Biostatistics and Epidemiology at Rutgers School of Public Health. And I also have an appointment in the Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey. So I'm an epidemiologist. I've trained in various, parts of epidemiology. I really understand the concept of outbreaks and epidemics and pandemics, although the majority of my work is not focused on infectious diseases. So, yeah.
That caveat. So, who are listening and watching, the idea here, she's letting you know she works in the field, noted and understands that this is not her day-to-day, but this is her general field of knowledge. And even there, I think you can just kind of break down a few things. You threw out some words that we're hearing a lot of buzzwords. One was pandemic. Can you tell me what a pandemic is?
Yeah, so a pandemic is really a large-scale spread of disease or illness across the globe. So when we talk about epidemics, we're really talking about the spread of diseases or illnesses in a specific population, or maybe groups of populations that are in close proximity to each other, whereas a pandemic is more global. And we can see that originally the COVID-19 outbreak, it started as an epidemic in Wuhan, China, right? But right now, months after it was an epidemic, it's now been classified by the World Health Organization as a pandemic because we're seeing cases in over 100 countries at this point.
Interesting. Well, I feel like that designation, it just came out from the World Health Organization. When people see WHO, that's what that is. That they're like the, how would you describe the World Health Organization?
So the World Health Organization is a part of the United Nations, and basically, I would say it's like the top tier organization for anything related to health on a global scale.
Got it. And for those who are still, it's popped up in pop culture right now. There's a popular meme about like who let the dogs out. Have you seen that? That meme? There's a meme of like that's who let the dogs out, but it says WHO, and it's like because once it was named a pandemic,
they let it out.
It released a bunch of like funds and stuff, and so people were like, who let the dogs out? It was kind of funny. It was ignorant, but that's how some people were like, what is who? Like, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But back to being serious. So question, COVID-19, we're hearing that word and we're hearing coronavirus. Are those interchangeable or are those the same thing?
So they're not interchangeable. I think the first thing that we need to clarify is that coronavirus and coronaviruses are not new. Coronaviruses, it's a class or a family of viruses that cause a variety of illnesses that range from the common cold to the more severe respiratory illnesses that we're seeing.
So corona is a spectrum of viruses that you're saying are the cold all the way to complex respiratory.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So coronavirus, a coronavirus is just one virus from a large class of viruses.
Okay. And so COVID-19 is a specific coronavirus?
So COVID-19 is what they're calling the illness, right? So for instance, SARS is an illness. It's severe acute respiratory syndrome. Hopefully I got that acronym correct. But SARS is the illness that is also caused by another coronavirus.
Got it. So
COVID-19 is what they're calling the illness. With the symptoms that they've listed.
So are there multiple? So what's taking over now? What we're getting tested for, or hopefully getting tested for? What we're all worried about passing on? Is it a bunch of different viruses under one that all lead to us getting COVID-19? Or is there like a specific strain of coronavirus that's going around that we're trying to like fight against?
Yeah, so I think at this point, it's that this particular strain or this particular type of coronavirus is leading to COVID-19, which is the illness that you need to be tested for to confirm whether or not you have COVID-19. So another way to put it is that all of us have been infected by a coronavirus, one or multiple.
At
right?
some point in our life.
Yes, at some point in our life. If we've had a common cold, it's likely one of the likely viruses that caused that cold was a coronavirus. So SARS and MERS and COVID-19 are specific illnesses that have, the cause of a coronavirus.
Okay. Interesting. So that's because I feel like in the media and how it's written, because just how you just explained it, that may have been like that first article when they broke it down, but I just feel like COVID-19, coronavirus has been just an interchangeable word. And then Corona has just taken off. Like it's easier to say, it's more catchy. Like, Unfortunately, that's how kind of the culture moves in the general public. And like people are like, if you look online now, like if you put up any kind of explaining video or like deep dive on what Corona is, it's like got millions of views because people just are ignorant. So I think that was a very interesting distinction that there's a specific coronavirus so when they're testing you, are they testing you for the illness COVID-19 or are they testing you for strain of coronavirus? Is that what we're
testing for a specific strain of coronavirus that causes
COVID-19? So like then I think it got real for me. I'm a huge basketball fan. Outside of politics, hip hop, I'm like a huge basketball fan. So I've got the NBA league pass, the whole nine. So it's already was being talked about a lot that there was an NBA, all the owners were meeting, like what was we going to do? They had said that by like Tuesday, it had been determined that the Warriors game was going to be played in an empty gym, and it was still rapidly evolving. And I think, we don't need to go into all the myriad of reasons why it was like a cascade of like importance from our leadership and Trump to how the mixed messages, all these different things that were going on, how private sector was reacting, seeing what's going on in Italy, China, shutting down multi-billion-dollar sports leagues and businesses and so forth. So it was all cascaded, and it's getting here, filtering to us in a different way. Then Wednesday night happened, March 11th. So like that's the day it got real to everybody because Rudy Gobert like tested positive, and they was like, "Hold up, we shutting the NBA down."
Yeah, everybody he was in contact with needs to be tested.
Yeah, so that's when it was like, not that it wasn't real, because
it got really real.
It got really real in the sense of like, oh, everything's about to change right now.
Yeah.
Because I like outside of this work, like I work in corporate communications and public relations and so forth. So we're sitting here and like working with several companies on like how to message, what are proper techniques, like giving them proper information and connected to them and like helping lead organizations and companies through, like I said, it's changing by the hour.
Yeah, it's rapidly
of how the response. So that message of like just hearing COVID-19, coronavirus, what those things we need to be aware of is like I said, it's something that I think is finally starting to sink into a lot of people. Kind of shifting gears, not shifting gears, but kind of going back into again like the spread and like the pandemic. We've seen it. We're getting here. There is news about mass infections and leading to deaths in Iran. Italy is like shut down as a country. All this travel bans from Europe, China, Wuhan, whatever the information we're getting out of there. But we know it got bad in there. South Korea, all these places that it spread. And now we're hoping, I think Americans were a little arrogant in the sense of like, we'll be straight. Like kind of with everything. And then people like, we had swine flu, bird flu, all this other thing. Can you explain and talk about why this is different as a disease, a spread, all these things, why this is different from, for lack of a better term, swine flu, major flus? I know they're all very different diseases, but why this spread and pandemic is different than like things that we heard about, Zika, even though Ebola, I know those methods of transitions and what they do are drastically different. So I know as diseases they're different, but we were all kind of hyped up that this could spread and get bad. Why is this spread different?
I mean, I think from an epidemiologic perspective, this is scary and crazy because we don't have enough information about this particular virus, right? So,
what do you mean we don't have enough information?
So the genome of the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 was literally just sequenced maybe a day ago by scientists in Canada.
Can you explain?
So the reason why that's important is because, and I was trying to get to why this is so serious and why it seems like we're panicking. It's because we don't know enough about this virus. Let me give you sort of like an example. So we have a seasonal outbreak of the influenza virus every year, right? Mm-hmm. People get sick. Some people die. It's very common. The difference is that for the flu virus, there are medications and there are vaccinations, right?
That's why when they say get your flu vaccine, that's to fight against.
Exactly. It's to prevent it.
Prevent an outbreak every year. Okay.
Right. And by preventing the outbreak, it's not that no one gets the virus, but that a smaller number of cases of the flu are diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, there are treatments.
I'm sorry.
There are treatments for the flu. So on the other hand, with this coronavirus, without having had the genome sequenced, it's going to be difficult to really develop therapeutic drugs, to target this virus, as well as, vaccines can't be developed. Right now, they're
never be developed, or they just be developed quickly.
Exactly. So not that it cannot be developed. I mean, there are already companies working on developing a vaccine, for this virus and, for this strain of the virus. And it takes time. It'll take at least 18 months to have the vaccine developed and then tested, phase 1, phase 2 trials, all of that to make sure that it's actually effective. Right. So because it's sort of
that normal, like it takes normally for if this was a different virus and they were like, all right, because I've heard that like you're when you get the flu virus, you're getting like a vaccine from like a strand 1 or 2 years ago, not like whatever the current one is. Is that true?
Oh, yeah. So that's the complexity of these viruses and all these different classes of viruses and the different strains. These viruses are in a way intelligent in the sense that their genomes are able to adapt and evade host immunity. So where we get certain infections or certain viruses and bacteria, our natural immune systems are able to fight them off, right? What happens is as we, are exposed to more viruses, the viruses are in different hosts and being passed from, animals to humans and all these different things, their genomes are evolving and mutating. And so the point that you're raising about the flu vaccine and that we're getting vaccines that are targeting, a strain from a year or two ago, yeah, it's because there's rapid evolution. So, we need to keep trying to address that rapid evolution, right? So new vaccines have to be developed and tested, and it's a process. I mean, that's true for any drug that comes on the market, any vaccine. But the more you know about the infection, the illness, the condition that you're trying to prevent, the better you would be prepared to do that, right? So it's a panic with this COVID-19 situation because, like I said, we don't know enough about the virus that's causing it, the strain of the virus that's causing the infection. And until we do, it's hard to know how to prevent it. The other thing is we also don't really have a good handle on the epidemiology of this particular coronavirus, right?
We don't have a handle on the epidemiology. What do you mean?
Yeah, so let's talk about what epidemiology is, right? So this branch of public health really focuses on understanding the incidence, the distribution of diseases in populations, and also the ability to control and prevent those diseases, right? So when I say we don't have a good handle of the epidemiology of COVID-19, so the disease that we're talking about, we can't really tell you, like in general, in the US, for instance, we don't know how many people in the US have COVID-19.
That's because we haven't tested enough people, right?
We haven't tested enough people to know. So that means we don't know what the distribution of COVID-19 is in the population.
So when we're hearing these numbers of like, I've heard numbers, people said there's like, in 18 months, 75 to 100 million people could get it. I've heard numbers as high as like 1 million people over the next 12 to 18 months could die, as it's a higher rate than the normal flu. But then I've also heard that like the big thing that everybody's seeing right now is this curve from, what's the guy's Dr.
Which one?
Yeah, the older Trump, not the head of CDC. How am I forgetting this? I'm sorry, people. I forgot this guy's name. Dr. Yaros. Is it Yaros? What's his name? Trump's main, well, not Trump, the government's main. You don't know who I'm talking about?
The Surgeon General?
No, he's not the Surgeon General. He's.
Well, I mean, aside from.
Sorry, I'll figure it out. But
yeah,
getting back to your point of the understanding epidemiology and what that spread and what that means. Like, what are people in your field trying to figure out about the disease in this? Like, what are you working? What are your colleagues in the field most prioritizing, you think?
I mean, I can't speak to what they're prioritizing. I can give my opinions about what they should prioritize.
Sure.
But first, I wanted to touch on your point about just these models that suggest, these ranges of numbers that are kind of projected. I think we don't really know, right? And that, making all these projections is leading to panic.
So you think those are irresponsible for those things to like? I don't even know if it was officially said. It's just I think that like work their way through the pop culture of like it's said on a podcast, it's said in the news. One person goes on the news, gives a projection, and it's like a lot of people say I don't know, but it could be this. It could be.
And that's the point that I'm trying to express is that at this point it's a lot of speculation, right? Until we know and have a handle on how many people in the US are affected, how many people in the US are dying, we can't say that 3% of the population of those infected will die. A lot of the information that we have on COVID-19 is coming from evidence from other countries, which is fine. That's all we have at this point. The issue that I see in the US response is that we haven't been testing enough people because we haven't had access to the test, right? So that's
Why do tests take so long? Why do tests take so long to make?
I don't think the problem was that the test takes so long to make. The
Okay.
test, I mean, let me give you another example. South Korea was testing 10,000 of their citizens per day,
I've heard that.
right? So it's not that the tests aren't, it's not that large quantities of the tests haven't been available. They just haven't been available in the US as a result of decisions that our current administration has made. I'm not going to get into the politics of that because I don't know why those decisions were made. I mean, there was also an error in the test that was being used, which I think at this point, those issues have been resolved. But now we need to test people.
So are the tests, I've seen like pictures of what the tests look like. Are the tests basically manufactured by private or public companies there, and then they have to just be distributed to different doctors, hospitals, or testing sites? And what is it? Do you know what a test, do you know what a test entails? Like, is it taking blood? Is it swabbing? Do people have to cough? What is a test?
So typically they'll swab your throat to see if there's virus, the virus that they're testing. So now they're in New York, at least, one particular area in New York, there's a drive-through testing situation. And that's been implemented in other countries as well for rapid testing of lots of people, at the same time.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to clarify something. Nasopharyngeal swabs, in addition to throat swabs, are used to in the drive-by testing and used to test for the COVID-19 illness. Dr. Llanos immediately texted me back after ours. Just wanted to clarify that there's two types of testing. So just wanted to clarify that. Sorry for the break.
I think the problem, though, is, we're just several weeks behind these other countries that have been implementing various strategies to get a sense of the epidemiology of the disease, right? To get a sense of how many people in the population are affected. What are what's the cycle of the disease in these people, right? Like, what are the symptoms? How many people are dying? What percent of the cases are severe? What percent of the cases are mild? It's not even completely clear that people that are infected, even if they're not showing any symptoms, are they actively spreading the disease? Spreading the illness, even though they may not outwardly appear to be infected. You know what I mean? So it's just a lot of, I would say, because I guess probably a lot of misinformation and mismanagement of, or misimplement. I don't even know. It's so many things that I think.
And I understand. Like I said, that's beyond the science of it. It's the science. There's the science. There's the funding. There's the administration. Coming from my world, there's the politics of all of this. Like, if you've known, they just finally last night the House passed a semi-bipartisan bill where hopefully it's going to get caught up in the Senate. Like, this is an election year. Like, there's so many things layered on top of that, and it sucks. I know, just taking off your science hat and just being a citizen, you're just like, man, can we please aside for one day? Let's all focus in on this. Trump, this is not about you. Pelosi, Democrats, is not about you. Biden, all that. I get life does need to go on, but like, let's just make sure we're limiting the amount of people, A, who get sick, B, who die, and the best way possible. Put all the money toward that. Taking a step back away from Corona, but more so going back into more of the theoretical and understanding of epidemiology and mass viruses. Is this there's a lot of quotes that have been popping up, like Bill Gates, he spends a lot of money on like global world health and predict something. People have different people are getting popular online, like, look at this prediction. They said this would happen. But I think you understanding just the nature of viruses spread, essentially flat the world is now in terms of interconnected. Like you can get all over the world quickly and cheaply, and so many more people are traveling. So we're close interaction with animals and how things jump from species to species. All these things, like it can go from, they say it goes from a pig it goes from a duck or a bird to their feces into the water and pig like it and weed pigs and people travel and boom, there's a like that movie Contagion is getting really popular right now, and there's been like deep dives into that. Just the idea of like how this has captured us. What should our level of awareness, fear, understanding about potential future pandemics, whether it be a corona type virus or something different? What is it about like our current setup like that we should understand about this? Because I think part of the biggest issue is panic and misinformation.
Yeah.
Not saying people aren't going to die or it won't work, but I think the panic is what's crumpled our economic system, which can lead to worse things happening.
Yeah.
Putting more people poor and getting out of work. So the panic and misinformation, how can you I want to speak to some of that, just the understanding of future pandemics or future disease spreads, like what we need to know about that, how those things happen.
It's so much in that, right? So the first thing is, I would say scientists and epidemiologists have predicted this level of a pandemic for decades, at least a decade, right? So it's not surprising that this happened. We watch sci-fi movies, and I'm like a science nerd, right? So these science and sci-fi movies like Contagion, for instance, I love watching movies like that because I look at it as like, all right, as humans, we have wild imaginations and we're creative and all that, but there's some truth in a lot of what we see in art, like movies, right? So I think the more knowledge there is about some of these other epidemics and other pandemics, like the Spanish flu of 1918 that actually lasted almost 2 years, is an example. We should have been preparing for something like that to happen again, right? We're aware that viruses, their genomes are, mutated, and there's a lot of evolution. You know what I mean? So it's like we knew that something like this could have happened. And even the Contagion movie, I feel like, is very similar to what we're seeing right now. Do I think that we need to be in a panic state? I really don't think that there's cause for panic, but I do think there is cause for us to perhaps consider changing some of our behaviors to try to minimize the exponential spread that it's gonna happen. It's inevitable, but we could
change.
I'm sorry?
What behaviors you said we need to minimize behaviors? What are common behaviors that you think that could change or something like that?
Very basic changes, like proper hygiene. That is the one very obvious method to prevent lots of illnesses, not just coronavirus, right? Like, I think sometimes we take for granted, people are in a rush all the time. Before this outbreak, I'm pretty sure people weren't making sure that they washed their hands properly with soap and for at least 30 seconds. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm one of the most vigilant as a person who works in an office building, going in the bathroom and seeing how many people take the beeline. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to. I want to shame more people into that, but it's pretty nuts. Like, you'd be surprised how many, at least on the men's side, you just see like, dude, you just came right out the stall and just exited
right outside the door.
I think hopefully help that
But
phenomenon.
this is the thing, right? So it seems really basic, like proper hand hygiene. But think about this. When you use the restroom or blow your nose or I don't know, pick your teeth with people do all sorts of things with their hands. If you don't wash your hands properly, anything that's coming out of your body that's on your hands is now on every surface that you touch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's a major source of spread for this particular virus, but it's also a major source of spread for lots of things. So basic things like hand hygiene is something very basic. Being really clean in general, like cleaning surfaces, regularly, cleaning doorknobs, things that more than one person touch on a regular basis should be clean to limit the spread of virus. Yeah, the common flu, the common cold, like all these things could be spread in this way. So I think this sort of coronavirus outbreak is just maybe making people a little bit more aware that there is a need to be a little bit more conscious about those things. And I do think that basic things like that could help. I mean, this other concept of social distancing, it makes perfect sense.
But then so about social distancing, I think that in and of itself is not tenable for the way our society as a global and American society is built on gatherings.
Of course.
Experiences. So you're not suggesting that we just eliminate all gatherings of 250 people?
So, this is where it gets really tricky because evidence shows that social distancing, at least for, for a specified amount of time, can reduce the rapid spread of COVID-19.
Oh, you're saying, I thought you meant in general, just
No. So everything doesn't need. So let's talk about the flu, for instance. Like I mentioned, there's a vaccine. There's medications. So social distancing isn't really going to have much more of an impact than these interventions that are already in place or that already exist for the flu. We don't have those interventions in place for COVID-19. So until we do, social distancing could be, one method to reduce the rapid spread of an infection that many people probably have, but don't know that they have. Do you see what I mean?
Got it.
So in addition to proper hand hygiene, being extra vigilant in cleanliness in general, social distancing, especially if you've been in contact with someone that might have the virus, things like that can really help. So the reason that social distancing, I think, is so important is because we're not prepared. Our health system is not prepared to manage a rapid increase in COVID-19 cases. So what we need to do is try to reduce rapid spread of the infection so that people that do have the disease can go to hospitals and healthcare facilities and be treated, right? So it's one thing to have, at your local hospital, to have 20 cases per day that need to go to the hospital that need to be treated versus having 2,000 cases per day that now need to be treated all at once. So social distancing can reduce the burden, like the immediate burden on the.
If you're saying that when we get together in large groups, one or two people may carry it, have it. It's going to continue to affect a large amount of people. Now, all hundreds of those people are going to go back to their individual houses. Even if y'all only come in contact around 2 or 3 or 5 people, it'll spread a lot faster than if we're just doing. People can still go and people have to work. People have to kind of interact. Yeah. But I'm going to limit the amount of people I'm around. So if I'm only around 20 people a day, it's going to spread a lot slower than if I'm around 250 people a day.
Right, because you got to think about those 20 people that you come in contact with. When they leave you, they're in contact with another 20. So each of those are in contact with another 20, and then another. So it's an exponential sort of spread in a really short amount of time.
So at that rate, it's going to spread no matter what.
It's going to spread no matter what. What the point of social distancing?
Fast it spread, like that's, so that goes back to, and I found his name, Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's been in this. CNN's had it, MSNBC, Fox News. They'll have like the bell curve, the high up bell curve, where it'll, if we don't distance and we don't do all these things, it'll spike. We don't have enough hospital beds. It'll overrun the system.
We don't have enough ventilators.
But the one thing I did notice about that, the elongated spread is longer though. Then we spike and a bunch of people get it. It seems like it ends quicker. Mm-hmm. Is there any logic to saying, well, how about we get them all these cases out the way now, so people don't have it for 2 years from now, a year from now?
I think that is counterproductive, because I agree
with that. I'm just saying, like, that was the one devil's advocate. I was like, well, if we could end this thing shorter, is that more helpful?
So I don't think we're going to end this thing quickly, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. Right? We don't have drugs to treat the illness, and the illness actually is very different than, say, the flu, because the virus is causing a viral pneumonia.
Got it.
Right? And so that's why there are some groups that are much more at risk of death if they contract this particular illness. The reason that like elongating the cycle, it's possible that this virus could have like a seasonal, curve where there are many cases during the cold seasons, and then we'll see a drop down in cases, in the summer, and then we'll see an increase again in the fall. We really don't know if that's sort of the pattern, similar to the influenza virus. But either way, until we have vaccines and drugs to actually treat this illness, I think it's reasonable to have like a longer spread, where the illness is being diagnosed in smaller numbers of people over a longer period of time, rather than having these really high incidence rates in a short period of time, right? So the people that get the virus really early, maybe a large majority of them end up dying because there are no interventions or cures. Whereas
we actually it's counterproductive for a bunch of people to get it. If you're going to get it, you want to get it in 6 months or a year, not right now.
Past a year, right? When there are vaccines that have been tested, when there are drug treatments that have been developed and shown to be effective.
Well, so question on this social distancing, and tell me if you don't, on social distancing, and caveat if you need to in terms of your understanding of this specifically and the concept of it. Most people are instituting 3 weeks to a month, maybe into April as the most extreme I'm hearing, in terms of like offices closing. The bans are like 30-day bans, 60-day bans at the most. But everybody understands the economic impact already is.
Yeah.
And if we have to extend it past 30 to 60 days, it could be low-key devastating, because we're just not prepared to shift.
Right.
And so many things of our economy and the global economy, in that sense, are built on personal interactions, gatherings. Like that's just what it is. Mm-hmm. And the trickle effect is not even a trickle effect; it's going to be a waterfall effect.
Yeah.
To the point on social distancing and like elongating it, like what type of timeline do you professionally think that are needed? Because we're trying to give people guidance and understand, like is 30 days even effective? Like I feel like it's more of it's something we're supposed to do. It is, as you've explained, it's something we should be doing. Yeah, let's do that right now that we don't know. But I'm also hearing in your explanation, hey, we should do this for a year.
No. I'm not saying we should social distance for a year.
No, I'm saying not saying that, but just like the safest thing to like that. I mean, that's not realistic, but the safest thing is like, let's be distant from each other for a year.
No, I mean, the safest thing would be to spread out the incidence of the disease, the incidence of the illness over a year rather than having
the social distancing timeline. What do you think is effective for understanding how diseases like this spread?
Yeah, I mean, so evidence from China and South Korea, suggests that at least, 14 to 30 days where people are not, so let's say social distancing as much as possible for that amount of time could really limit the spread. It doesn't mean that people will not be infected, and need to be treated in that time. But like I said, it would be a smaller number needing to, go to the health systems, right? Like let me just say, I think 15 to 30 days, because when there have been these, social distancing, like, I don't even know what you call it, like statewide, nationwide social distancing in some of these countries in Asia, including in Singapore, they actually went from over 1,000 cases being identified per day to less than 50 per day in just a short period of time. You see how different that is?
But my counter to that is so we do it for 30, say we do 60 days. But people still are going to have it and it's going to continue to work its way. So right in time for summer, we pop right back into full house parties, concerts, festivals. We go right back into our normal way of life. Does it not just pop right back up because we're all back around each other again?
Well, it's possible that some people who were already exposed might have built an immunity to it.
Got it.
Right? So there's a lot of sort of contributors to how social distancing can work. And I also think, our, like you mentioned, our society, it's social distancing for long periods of time. Number one, seems almost impossible in our society and our culture.
Almost. You could take the almost.
Yeah. But I think we need to be realistic about the possible benefits of doing that. But I also think, what we haven't talked about at all, and you brought it up a little bit, is sort of the socioeconomic impacts of the virus itself, but also the socioeconomic impacts of the social distancing. So I just bring that up because I think one of the major issues is that we don't really have like clear leadership that is going to make sure that certain things are implemented in a way that can have an impact, right? So if, some school districts close and others don't, or some employers allow remote working and others don't, like there are so many sort of issues related to that.
We have not, I think.
And there's no guidance.
There's no guidance. I think it's also new.
Yeah.
Straight up. It's something that we didn't have ready to push go on. Not even just from, I can't put it all on just leadership, even though Trump administration, I think, is doing a terrible job to this point. But the system is just like our economic system and our preparedness on every level, and that anybody, whether it be the economist, Wall Street, whether our healthcare system, top to bottom, like government, private sector, our laws that are in place to like allow for these type of things, all these things are just not prepared for the shock to the system. This is something that it's not been screamed from the mountaintops, but it's been well reported and documented for years. Whenever there's a major, I think it it's less with the diseases and more with like when natural disasters have happened over the last several years. You start to see like, wow, the economy crumbles when we can't recover, when a bunch of people can't go to work for
Right.
whatever, like, for something that they can't control. And that whatever does happen not only allows people not to go to work, it shuts a lot of other people down from spending money in places they would normally spend money, which
Right.
is, it's a fragile machine or economic machine.
And it's all interdependent.
It's so interdependent. I think we need to, I think a lot of that has to be studied. My experience of having been on the lawmaking side, at least on the federal side in Congress for several years, it's as much as we need to respond fast, that place can only respond so fast for a specific reason, in the sense that these are very deliberate, so interdependent actions that they make. Like, it's like people say, just give me the money, like, and run. And it's like, dude, that's not how money like works from this system. And like, where all this is borrowed money. Like, there's just so many different factors. And then if we implement it when we distribute it, how it goes to whose states and municipalities, all those things, somebody's, and people think there's just like armies of people crunching numbers and emailing and figuring all this out. It's like, as a person who's been a staffer, like, nah, you got a bunch of, at least in the Congress side, you got probably 70% of those people are under 30 years old, try to figure out try to figure out these different parts. Laws are being cobbled together. They're getting information from all types of sources. And it's just a complex process, just to make sure it's not so rushed that it's just like, it's highly ineffective. It already is going to, the nature of the system, it's going to not be the maximum amount of effective it could be, but there's just a lot of complexities to that. So I always caution people when I talk to people about like the government, and they're like, yes, I share your frustration, but having worked on the inside,
Yeah.
if it worked faster, it would work even worse.
Probably true.
It would be even worse. But I say that in some senses. But as it relates to this, I think that's just honestly, that's just not another topic for another day, but that's just so deep in the sense of like, I think what it's going to require from a leadership standpoint, what it's going to require from employers. At the end of the day, some employers, you also got to start realizing if their productivity decreases and they can't make money, they want to pay people, but I can't pay you if I don't have money.
Right. So we're talking about employers and employees, right? So let's think about if the healthcare providers are exposed to the illness, right? And they're unable to go to work because we haven't been doing what we can in our own communities to reduce the spread of the virus. So then who's going to take care of all these people that are sick?
I've heard that as like a potential issue, is that because our healthcare workers, two reasons. Our healthcare workers are around people, so they're likely the first people who are going to contract this. And so there's going to be a rash of them getting sick initially. And then the other part is with schools closing,
They can't go to work.
They've got kids at home. So you got millions of children around the country who are just home. And not saying every healthcare worker has kids, but I don't know what the percentage is, but I would say it's more than 50% probably have children. So the complexities, not only just time and it's financial too. It's like, this is an extra budget thing. I got to pay somebody who hopefully is still willing to come over and take care of my child, if I can even afford that. But this is
where leadership comes in. And I'm not just talking about the president, right? I'm talking about governors, mayors, local leaders. Like, let's talk about what the benefits of closing schools for 30 days will be. Maybe it's not the schools that need to be closed. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying yes or no or whatever, but I think there hasn't been enough thoughtful discussion about how to address some of these issues around this particular outbreak. And it happened really rapidly, and it's going to continue to evolve really rapidly. And a lot of people are going to be infected. And hopefully we can get to a point where it's under control. But right now, it's not under control.
Well, this has been very, like, a super insightful. I mean, we could go into so many different angles about this. I think just some of the basics that you just, and I consider myself a pretty smart guy. I just got educated on. So I know a ton of people who've been watching, people who are going to see this and hear this, will be able to get a lot from it. I got a lot from it, understanding some basics on pandemics, the disease, the COVID-19 illness versus having coronavirus, um, just some of the ripple effects that it can have, what social distancing is. Like, you just literally broke down a bunch of things that, um, I like I said, the general audience will appreciate. Um, I'm gonna do my best to, like, try to get this information out far and wide. And I did have a question, like a closing question, more about you and your path to this. Like, you're a young black or African American black woman. Um, you went to Howard with me. Was this with, were we in biology together or something?
Maybe.
I started off as a biology pre-med major.
Yeah, I mean, I was a pre-med major.
I switched out and went to psychology because it was a little easier, and I like space time. But what was your path to understanding to do what you're doing? Because this, I would dare say, most people, the general misconception or conception is that Black people are not epidemiologists or thinking about being this type of scientist. Like, what led you to getting into what you're doing? And,
so
like,
before I answer that, I do want to say there aren't very many Black epidemiologists. I mean, I know a handful of them. And through Twitter, like, I've met more. But so in undergrad, I was a pre-med major. I majored in biology and minored in chemistry. And I really thought that I was going to go to med school. But when I was a junior, I took the parasitology course with Dr. Lee. I don't know if you remember him, but it was a graduate level writing course in biology. And I took it as an undergrad. And I got an A in the class. And I was talking to Dr. Lee about the prospect of going to med school or doing a PhD. And he really encouraged me to think about doing a PhD. And his reason was that he just felt like my critical thinking and my writing was really, really on point. And he just felt like perhaps if I went to medical school, that it might be wasted. Like, it's just a completely different.
You're more of a critical thinker.
Yeah.
Like science, you have to obviously think.
Yeah. And so, thinking about that, I really thought about, potentially doing a doctoral program. In undergrad, like, I worked 2 jobs, I had to pay the bills. So it was really hard to study for the MCAT and get really high MCAT scores, which is a requirement. So I took the MCATs, they weren't that great, didn't get into med school. My plan was to take a year off. At that point, I was actually full-time employed in the fashion industry, right? And
first year out of Howard?
While I was at Howard. And
while you're at Howard, okay.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was Dr. Lee reached out to me during that summer when I was going to take that gap year. And he said, what would you do if I offered you an opportunity to have your PhD funded? I'm like, I would take it. Like, right? So basically that opportunity presented itself, and it was
reaching back. That's that HBCU Howard love. People do not understand. Like, everybody got stories like that. Keep going, please. This is dope.
Yeah. And I tell this story because I feel like sometimes we think we know what we're supposed to do, but God has another plan. That was God, right? So I got this opportunity, and basically he said all I needed to do was find a doctoral program, apply to it, take the GRE, so the graduate exam, whatever, and if I could do all of that in 2 weeks, I have this fellowship that will cover my PhD.
At Howard?
So yes, I did it at Howard. So I'll tell you actually how this all worked out. It's a little bit of a long story. I don't know how much time I have.
Real quick, just a quick interjection. The idea about this, and that's something I've tried to do with almost like all of our guests when we do get on. We talk about what they do or what's in the news or what like the expertise that try to, like I said, trying to demystify the process of all these things in the hip hop political world, but also it's inspirational. Like I'm bringing on not just Black people, but you're bringing on or Latino or minorities, but you're bringing on just people where most people don't even know what epidemiologist is, let alone they have the concept to think I could be this, to be impactful. And like right now, dude, I feel like the price is going up on epidemiologists. Like,
I hope so.
You should be jumping on TV if you want to. Podcast.
Yeah.
But so so you got this fellowship, got it funded.
Yeah.
By, Dr. Lee.
Yes. So the fellowship was through the National Science Foundation, and they funded this program, the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. So basically,
shout out to Louis Stokes, Congressman, former Congressman, deceased, but legend in the game, one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus from my hometown of Cleveland.
Yes, and this fellowship. Basically, this fellowship increases the pool of scientists pursuing PhDs from underrepresented groups. And Howard University was one of the organizations that had this fellowship program. So I applied to the genetics program at Howard. And as soon as I got off the phone with Dr. Lee, I was trying to figure out, should I do genetics or should I do biology? And I was really interested in genetics just from the undergraduate program in biology at Howard. So I reached out to Dr. Heddings, who's deceased. Amazing scientist and advisor. He's the person that I reached out to immediately when I wanted to just talk about doing a PhD in genetics. So called him, we set up an appointment, and he basically interviewed me on the spot. I brought my transcripts. I told him a little bit about some of my community service experiences and other things that I was doing outside of just my academics. And basically he said, listen, if you can just take the GRE, I'm prepared to unofficially admit you into an accelerated PhD program in genetics. I took the GRE the next week, submitted my scores, boom, I was in the PhD program. So I did the PhD program at Howard. It was in the medical school, and, we had classes in medical school and, biology building and things like that. So for the first 2 years, all I did was do my coursework, and then in the last 3 years, I did my dissertation research at Georgetown in the Lombardi Cancer Center. So in the first 2 years, I really was interested in cancer research. I was really interested in understanding inequities in cancer research. And so that led me to an investigator in the Lombardi Cancer Center who invited me to join his lab. And basically that's what I did. So I finished my PhD in 5 years. After that, I did 2 postdoctoral fellowships. 2 years at Georgetown, and then 2 years at Ohio State.
OHIO.
OHIO, I didn't hear that part. So when I was at Ohio State, I can hear you, yeah. But I think when it cuts out a little bit.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Oh, I think I see it going back and forth, so I think it picks up who's talking and prioritize. All right. I'm sorry. So, wow. So that's a lot of education to get to.
13 years. So when I was at Ohio State as a postdoc, I did the MPH program in epidemiology. And, I started, so it's kind of interesting because the work that I did at Georgetown for my PhD was all lab-based. So it was a carcinogenesis, biomarkers, and epidemiology lab that I was working in. And from there, that's where I really got interested in epidemiology. I was learning epidemiology from my lab, my PhD mentor at Georgetown. And then I was like, you know what? I need to get a formal degree in epidemiology so that I can integrate the genetics and epidemiology, right? So I really did that. And long story short, my postdoc at Ohio State really allowed me to start thinking more about how I could study the molecular and sociobiologic mechanisms that are involved in inequities in cancer. And so that's really what I do now. I focus on cancers that disproportionately affect minority and medically underserved populations. And the goal is to really understand how we can address those disparities so that there can be more health equity. And related to like epidemiology and viruses, one of the areas that I've been studying is human papillomaviruses and the carcinogenic ones. So they're viral. HPV, yeah. And so how we, through HPV prevention, we could address some disparities in HPV-associated cancers. I also do a lot of breast cancer research. Most of my work so far has focused on disparities in breast cancer.
Wow. That's, you have a book coming out?
Nope.
I'm telling you, right? The book game, it is just a little bit of entrepreneurial advice. The book game is the new rap game.
Yeah.
It's like now that everything's digital and streaming, like you're so intelligent. You've clearly, like I said, whether it's around your work on the disparities in cancer, breast research, health disparities, whether you want to make it completely like educational / I know you're probably writing papers and like
Lots of papers.
find a way to turn it into some kind of narrative or a book about, even if you wrote a book about your life and your story or some work that you're doing, like long term in terms of finance, it's like every time you do something, you'd be surprised, people buy old books based on wherever you continue to speak 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Now that everything's digital, it's so easy for like, I'll spend $3.99, $4.99 on this person's audio or digital book when I saw them speak somewhere.
Yeah.
But that cumulative money and then it just, in the general public, like in your world, journals and articles are what's obviously ultimately respected and make the difference. In the general public, people just read like books and time. Even if I never read the book, they authored 6 books, they must be more important.
We need to talk more about that book. Maybe you could help me get that started.
I can help you on a promotion. You got to write it.
No, I'm gonna need somebody else to write it. I could just narrate
it. In terms of this, but Dr. Llanos, mother, right?
Yep. Wife, epidemiologist,
professor, teacher.
Yep.
Thank you for being on. Do you want to is anything you want to shout out, give social media, things people could look into, maybe some websites, what people should be following, just lead the people with a little bit of either stuff you're doing or just things that you suggest they go to read up on.
So, we were talking about the coronavirus and COVID-19. I would suggest people really check your sources for the information that you get. I think it's unfortunate that we continue to share misinformation or inaccurate information. So I would definitely suggest that people maybe check out the World Health Organization website, CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website, to get accurate information. I think it's great to also just talk about these things, be aware, watch the news. Although I will say, when you're watching news reports on this outbreak, and also when you're reading about different articles about it, you got to keep in mind people's politics, right? Their perspective, where they're coming from in their writing, and also how much they actually know about it. I think, we're in the information age where information is rapid. It's coming at us from everywhere, and sometimes the information is not correct. So that's all I'll say about COVID-19. Thank you so much.
Debunk this last theory.
Oh.
Can Black people get COVID-19? or because our melanin doesn't allow us to get it. Like that's literally was a meme that turned real. Like I got that in text messages. People DM'd me when I asked people to drop questions. That was the number one question: can Black people get coronavirus?
The short answer is yes. Black people can get COVID-19. So it's a myth. Anybody can get COVID-19, just like anybody can get a cold, right? So that's the short answer. I think there might be some individuals that might have some level of immunity based on some genetic, information. We won't get into that. I will say there's research that suggests that there might be some groups that might have potentially lower risk. Not like I said, there's not enough information about this virus to say, but I will say, yes, Black people can get the infection. So don't think that you're immune. Obviously, what's the NBA player's name?
Donovan Mitchell is very Black.
Okay.
So there's light skin, but he's still Black.
So there you go. Obviously, Black.
Another country, but he's still
Black.
Black. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, make sure if you're hearing this, make sure you're tuning in. I'm gonna figure out a better live experience. So next time I do, because clearly we're gonna have to do more of these podcasts digitally. So I'm gonna be streaming some more of them. But I appreciate you coming on this morning on a Saturday morning, kind of breaking down, giving this game, breaking this all down to everybody. This was a informative conversation. It really joys my heart as a fellow Howard alum to be able to talk to you, and like super proud of you and the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you
For your, service to the community, stuff you're working on. Like you said, these health disparities around cancer and the treatment. I think it's very impactful work for us and our community. Make sure if you're hearing this, you following us. This is like I said, this is an emergency podcast. Had to do it, even though we just dropped our normal episode on Wednesday. If you're hearing this, I'm putting this out immediately on all platforms: Spotify, iTunes. We're on 1,000. We're on the 5,000 subscriber challenge for YouTube. If you go to YouTube, look up the Politics Podcast, just push subscribe. We're now transitioning and doing more video. The merch is out now. It's been a weird time to drop stuff. We were supposed to have a big merch drop. As you see, I'm wearing some stuff. People ain't worried about that right now. So it's out, it's available, but I'm pushing back like the promotional push and some things a little bit. So, but if you want to support, make sure you go on Politics.org and Politics Podcast. Support your boy, Mr. Cameron Calvin, on all social, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Will be stay safe, stay socially distanced, be vigilant, check on the elderly and the young people. Let's try to do our best to elongate that curve and try to be vigilant. Don't panic. Don't panic buy. Help those if you can, and have the means to help those who are going to be struggling right now. And with that, Dr. Llanos, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We are out.